August 7, 1942, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. As dawn broke over the Pacific, 11,000 United States Marines stormed ashore in what would become the first major Allied offensive against the Empire of Japan. Operation Watchtower marked a turning point in the Pacific War. But beyond the naval battles and jungle combat that followed, an unexpected weapon emerged in the dense darkness of the island's perimeter. One rooted not in steel or explosives, but in the fundamental structure of human language itself. The challenge was immediate and deadly serious. In the chaos of jungle warfare, where visibility dropped to mere feet in dense tropical vegetation, where the enemy spoke English and sometimes wore captured American uniforms, how could sentries distinguish between friendly forces and Japanese infiltrators attempting to penetrate American lines under cover of darkness? The answer came from an unlikely source, the pronunciation of a single letter. Master Technical Sergeant James W. Hurlbut, a combat correspondent with the United States Marine Corps Reserve, landed with the assault forces on August 7th. In a March 10, 1943 interview preserved in naval records, Hurlbut provided direct testimony about the security measure that became standard practice during the campaign. His words offer the clearest primary source evidence we possess about pronunciation testing in the Pacific theater. "We always had passwords, including the letter L," Hurlbut explained, because L was thought to be hard for the Japanese to pronounce since there is no L in the Japanese vocabulary. This simple observation reflected a sophisticated understanding of linguistic limitations that would prove invaluable for American security throughout the campaign. Hurlbut noted one crucial limitation that revealed its real-world application. The test sometimes failed with English-educated Japanese soldiers. This indicated that Marines were encountering infiltrators with varying levels of English proficiency, and that the measure, while effective, was not foolproof. By 1600 hours, or 4 p.m., on August 8th, Marines had captured the nearly completed Japanese airfield. The airstrip, initially designated Lunga Airfield by the Japanese, was renamed Henderson Field after Major Lofton R. Henderson, a Marine aviator killed at the Battle of Midway. The airfield became operational when the first PBY Catalina flying boat landed on August 12th, and by August 20th, the permanent air contingent arrived with 31 aircraft. Control of this airfield became the focal point of the entire 6-month campaign, with Japanese forces launching repeated attempts to recapture it. Security around Henderson Field and the defensive perimeter became paramount. Japanese forces, demonstrating the tactical flexibility and determination that characterized their operations throughout the Pacific War, attempted numerous infiltration operations. They moved through the jungle at night, sometimes in small groups, sometimes individually, seeking to gather intelligence, sabotage equipment, or misdirect American forces. The nighttime environment created perfect conditions for infiltration. Sentries posted at checkpoints around the perimeter had to make split-second decisions about whether approaching figures were friendly Marines or enemy infiltrators. Traditional identification methods proved inadequate in these conditions. Documents could be captured or forged. Uniforms could be taken from casualties. Physical appearance was difficult to verify in darkness. Even voices could be deceptive, as some Japanese soldiers spoke English with varying degrees of fluency. The Marines needed a method that could not be easily counterfeited, something that revealed identity through characteristics the infiltrator could not consciously control. The solution lay in exploiting the phonological structure of the Japanese language. To understand why this approach proved so effective, we must examine the fundamental differences between Japanese and English sound systems. Japanese possesses one liquid phoneme represented in standard Hepburn romanization as R, but pronounced quite differently from either the English R or L sound. This Japanese liquid is classified as an alveolar tap, produced by quickly tapping the tongue against the alveolar ridge, the area just behind the upper front teeth. English, by contrast, has two distinct liquid phonemes. The English L sound is a lateral approximant, produced by placing the tongue tip firmly against the alveolar ridge while allowing air to flow around the sides of the tongue. The American English R sound is quite different, typically produced as a post-alveolar approximant with the tongue pulled back and not touching the roof of the mouth at all. These two English sounds occupy distinctly different positions in the phonetic space, easily distinguished by native English speakers, but falling within a single perceptual category for Japanese speakers. This phonological difference is not a matter of physical inability or hearing impairment. Japanese speakers can physically produce both English sounds with proper training, and they can hear the acoustic differences between them when sounds are presented in isolation. The difficulty is perceptual and categorical. The Japanese language processes both English sounds through a single phonetic category established during early childhood language acquisition. When Japanese speakers hear English R and L sounds in actual speech, their brains automatically categorize both sounds as instances of the single Japanese liquid phoneme. Research conducted during and after World War II confirmed this phenomenon. Studies by Goto in 1971, Miwaki and colleagues in 1975, and Takagi and Mann in 1995 documented that Japanese speakers struggled to perceive the English R and L distinction even after extended exposure to English. The 1975 Miwaki study revealed something particularly relevant to the wartime application. When researchers manipulated recordings of R and L sounds to make them sound less speech-like by removing certain acoustic information, Japanese speakers could distinguish them as well as native English speakers. This proved that the difficulty was not in hearing the acoustic differences, but in how the brain processed those differences as linguistic sounds. For military security purposes, this linguistic reality meant that Japanese soldiers attempting infiltration faced a nearly insurmountable obstacle. Even soldiers who had studied English extensively, who might know vocabulary and grammar, who could maintain a conversation in English, would betray themselves through pronunciation of words containing L sounds. The pronunciation was not under conscious control. Under stress, fatigue, or time pressure, automatic native language pronunciation patterns would emerge, regardless of the infiltrators' intentions or preparation. The Marines implemented this knowledge through challenge words containing multiple L sounds. According to Hurlbut's testimony and available documentation, passwords systematically incorporated the letter L specifically because Japanese speakers would struggle to pronounce it correctly. When a sentry challenged an approaching figure with a password containing L sounds, a native English speaker would pronounce it automatically and correctly. A Japanese speaker, even one with good English, would typically substitute sounds closer to the Japanese liquid, producing something that sounded distinctly wrong to the trained ear of the sentry. One specific word has entered the historical record, though it comes from a single source. Oliver Garling, a journalist with the Associated Press, published "Free Men Are Fighting the Story of World War II" in 1942, with Farrer and Reinhardt. Garling wrote that Japanese soldiers would sometimes approach checkpoints posing as American or Filipino military personnel. He stated that sentries would use a shibboleth, such as Lollapalooza, and if the first two syllables came back as roar, the sentry would open fire without waiting to hear the remainder. The word Lollapalooza represents an ideal choice for this purpose, if it was indeed used. An American slang term meaning something outstanding or extraordinary, it contains 4 L sounds in rapid succession at the beginning of syllables Lollapalooza. For a Japanese speaker, each of these L sounds would present difficulty, making it virtually impossible to pronounce the word correctly without extensive training. The instruction to listen specifically to the first two syllables makes tactical sense as well. A sentry would not need to wait for the complete password to identify mispronunciation, reducing exposure time during the challenge. Despite the effectiveness of this approach, it was not without its limitations. As Hurlbut noted, it sometimes failed with English-educated Japanese. Any Japanese individual who had spent childhood years in an English-speaking environment would have acquired native-like pronunciation and could pass L-based tests. Japanese intelligence services were aware of this advantage and occasionally employed individuals with English backgrounds for intelligence operations. Additionally, in the chaos of combat with artillery fire, explosions, and shouting, subtle pronunciation differences might be difficult to detect reliably. The test also carried risks of false positives. American forces in the Pacific included soldiers from diverse backgrounds, including Filipino scouts and soldiers, Chinese Americans, and others whose English might carry non-standard pronunciations or accents. Security procedures needed to account for legitimate variation in English pronunciation among Allied forces. The post-war period saw the declassification of many documents related to security procedures in the Pacific. Historians found extensive documentation of the development, implementation, and effectiveness of various security measures. Though specific documentation of pronunciation testing remained limited primarily to Hurlbut's testimony and the Garling reference. The story reminds us that military success depends on countless small innovations developed by those facing immediate problems and finding practical solutions. The systematic use of L-based passwords at Guadalcanal, while perhaps not as elaborate as some popular accounts suggest, represented genuine innovation that addressed a real security challenge. Today, the story of pronunciation testing at Guadalcanal stands as a small but significant chapter in the larger history of the Pacific War. It illustrates how language, that most human of characteristics, can become a factor in warfare. It shows how understanding differences between languages can provide tactical advantages, and it demonstrates that success in warfare often comes from combining large strategic decisions with countless small tactical improvements developed by soldiers facing immediate problems. The Marines at Guadalcanal faced extraordinary challenges in one of the first major American offensive operations of the Pacific War. Their innovation in developing practical security measures like pronunciation testing, alongside their courage in combat and their determination in holding Henderson Field against repeated Japanese attacks, contributed to a strategic victory that changed the course of the Pacific War. The verified core of the story remains powerful. American forces exploited fundamental differences in how Japanese and English speakers produce and perceive liquid consonant sounds to create a security measure that was simple, effective, and difficult to counterfeit. This application of linguistic knowledge, whether derived from conscious understanding or practical observation, represented exactly the kind of tactical innovation that contributed to Allied victory in the Pacific. In a broader context, this story illustrates the impact of linguistic insights in military strategy, how small tactical decisions can change the course of history, and how ingenuity in the face of adversity can make all the difference in war.